Good afternoon. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our special live panel presentation, South Africa Screams. This is the second of a series of free live panels and artist talks that we'll be presenting throughout the duration of the festival. I hope you enjoyed today's, and I hope you check out some of the other ones to come. Now, bit of setup before I bring on the gang. This is a really exciting one. So in recent years, it's been especially exciting for me as a programmer to introduce Montreal cinephiles to what's become a bold new wave of South African genre filmmaking. The journey began with our screenings of Michael Matthews' Five Fingers from Marseille and Nosipho Dumisa's Number 37, both brilliant films, and oddly both films with numerically driven titles, the latter of which ended up winning a jury award that year. Since then, we haven't looked back, with new South African genre works gracing our lineup pretty much each year. This year, we're putting together this panel in celebration of the fact that we're going to be launching not one, but two world premieres of South African genre works in our programming. Travis Taute's subversive action thriller Indemnity, which premieres this coming Wednesday, August 11th, and Kelsey Egan's dreamy dystopian fairy tale Glasshouse, premiering on Monday, August 16th. So for this panel, we've collected some of the leading voices of the new wave of South African film. They've all screened here in the past, or they're about to screen here in our 25th edition. To moderate this panel, I've invited XYZ Films' Todd Brown to come on, a longtime friend of the festival, one time a Fantasia programmer, a great man. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to turn over the virtual stage to Todd Brown.
Thanks so much, Mitch. It's exciting to do this. I still like Fantasia's family to me, and I don't get to come out nearly as often as I would like to, just as life has gotten busy. But it's always a really, really good time to come back. And on the other side, weirdly, a lot of these people we're going to be talking to kind of feel like family too. It's South Africa kind of came on my radar personally about 8 or 9 years ago. In the before times, before COVID, I was down there kind of every year for every one of those years. And it started more or less on a hunch that it sort of felt like something was going on that people should pay attention to. And then that hunch sort of paid out. And literally on that very first trip, I met everybody on this panel except for Ryan, who we crossed paths with a little bit later. And at the time, it was like brand new company startups and people who were fresh out of film school. And it's really felt like a privilege to me to, at least as an observer, to kind of watch what's developed and to see what's going on down there. I'm going to get our panelists to introduce themselves because
and I'm going to back out now and watch in silence.
Yeah.
I'll see you all.
So I'm going to call you out in the order that you're on my screen, which will be different for everybody else. And then we'll kind of kick into this. So we're going to start off with Michael, please. And you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, I unmuted myself. I'm Michael Matthews, and I directed Five Fingers for Marseille, and then the more recent film, Love and Monsters.
Ryan?
Hi, I'm Ryan Kruger. I'm the writer-director of Fry Barry.
Travis, unmute yourself and say hello.
Right, there we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Travis Taute. I'm a writer-director at Gambit Films in Cape Town. And as Mitch mentioned, I've got my first feature playing at Fantasia this year. It's called Indemnity. Check it out.
Kelsey.
Hello, my name is Kelsey Egan. I am the director and co-writer of Glasshouse, which is having its world premiere at Fantasia this year.
And Nosipho.
Hello, I am Nosipho Dumisa. I am also a writer-director at Gambit Films in Cape Town, but I am in Joburg right now. And I had the pleasure of having my film screen at Fantasia number 37 a few years ago and happened to win there, which is really great.
Woo!
And we finish up with Bradley.
I am Bradley Joshua, producer at Gambit Films, producer of Nosipho's number 37, which won at Fantasia in 2018, and producer of Travis's Indemnity, which is in competition at Fantasia this year and has its world premiere on Wednesday the 11th.
As we kick off, one thing that I always like to flag when I do these sorts of things, different people run panels different ways, and this is both for kind of our panelists and for people observing. I like to have a conversation, personally. I've got talking points, I've got stuff. They're the things that I think are interesting. It's not necessarily things everybody else is going to think is interesting. Feel free to go on tangents. It's why I make notes, so that if we need to pull things back, we can. And people out there kind of watching this and participating, I know that some of you are on Zoom and some of you are streaming on YouTube. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do in terms of the YouTube people. But everybody who's watching on Zoom, please feel free, if something comes up that you want to ask a question about or you want a little bit of context on, you can enter things into the Q&A section. We will hit a point, ideally, where we kind of formally go Q&A, but I'm going to be keeping an eye on that all the way through. And we'll do my absolute best to kind of weave things in. As we start up, I'm going to do one of those things you're not supposed to do in this, and it's not going to start with a question. I'm going to start with a little bit of an observation and kind of my impressions of things when I came down there, because I think it helps set a little bit of context. And I'm very curious, both the majority of you as South Africans in South Africa, if you think I saw things correctly, and Kelsey as an outsider who has transplanted there as well, kind of your impressions as you walked into what can be a very, very complicated political and social landscape. Kind of if you were seeing and feeling the same things. One of the first things that really struck me as I got looking, and it seems to have carried out, is whether you're looking at the genre films or even in the art house films, and you're looking, because there is an art house wave of South African filmmakers as well right now that have been breaking out. And every year, every one of the A festivals has launched somebody new. It feels like there's been really significant movement all over the place. But the one thing that's really consistent is there's a very large generation gap in the South African filmmaking scene, that there is a young generation of people who are pretty universally the ones who are breaking out, whether it is in the genre world or in the art house world. And there definitely is an older generation. But either the films that they're making just don't seem to have any traction or much interest from the outside world, or they're only really interested in servicing outside productions. And what it feels like from the outside looking in is, on one hand, you've had this generation that's been almost stranded, and you haven't really had mentors or people from the previous generation who could teach and lead you through, and you've had to forge your own path. And at the same time, when you look at who these people are who are forging out, you're all, I'd say, pretty much within about a 5-year age span, kind of in this first volley, and you're all a group of people who lived the transition out of apartheid, typically between the ages of about 5 to 10. So it was there as a foundational thing as you were children, but you have mostly lived in the post-apartheid world. And I kind of feel like on a certain level, those things are linked in terms of your insistence on forging your own voices and your willingness to say, okay, if there's nobody out here who's going to teach us to do this, we're just going to do it ourselves. Do those feel like true things from the inside, or am I just completely out of my mind?
I think you speak some sense, Todd.
Yeah, from Todd, I think it's very, very accurate. I speak from my experience with Gambit Films, and when I first joined them, they were just I think a year out of film school, And we then obviously we built this business. But the immediate thing that I noticed with Nosipho, Darren, Travis, Simon, was that I'm a few years older than them. But the immediate thing that I noticed as someone that when I joined wasn't from the film industry, was that here was a group of people that believed that anything was possible, that there were no barriers. And I think that also ties into sort of, let's call it pre-apartheid and post-apartheid thinking. And I think pre-apartheid thinking, we always lived like there were barriers, and so we did what we could within the realm of those barriers. But what I encountered with these fresh sort of new creatives, they were going for the highest echelons of the industry. They were out to make Hollywood blockbusters. That's what they were thinking, and that's what they were striving towards. And I think that's what drew me in was, I encountered a group of people that believed anything was possible. And I think that has got to do with pre and post-apartheid thinking.
Did you find, oh, sorry, Nosipho, you were about to speak.
No, I probably shouldn't say this. I just wanted to, it was a point of correction for Bradley. He said that he's a few years older. He is quite a bit older, and I wanted to correct you that it's not a 5 years age span. I had nothing against Bradley, but there's a group of us here who may have been vaccinated already, and some of us may have not. And Bradley's definitely in the was long ago vaccinated group. Just wanted to correct that. We can carry on.
Which might sound very confusing internationally, a lot more politically charged than age-related. I was going to say a couple of things just on the, like, I'm pretty sure everyone on the call on this panel has had to like figure out their own way to go and make movies. I think that's for sure. There wasn't, I think now there's starting to be a bit more of like a direction to go where there's ways to get it done. But I definitely felt like getting towards, making Five Fingers for the first time, and quite a few, I know from the rest of the people here, it's like, there's not just an open space and an easy like place to make the films, especially genre stuff or trying to do more interesting things that are different or unique. The art house side, I think, is sort of different. I would say the like real pushed festival, like very personal type stories versus the genre stuff. I feel like that's always sort of been ticking every few years. There's been something, but the one thing I was going to say just on the change, like it's so hard to know, but I almost feel like maybe a lot of it's because of the audience, mostly internationally and stuff, just opening up a little bit more, there being a space where people actually want to see something that's South African or African, that's subtitled, that's in a genre, whereas 15 years ago, that was just like such a difficult space to find anyone who was, looking for that kind of thing. That also might be part of it.
Yeah, just sorry,
Todd.
Go,
Kelsey.
No, thanks. I just wanted to jump in from the outside perspective that you acknowledged. I'm very much a transplant and very grateful to have been welcomed with open arms when I was very, very young. I'm now a dual citizen. And when I first moved to South Africa, I was blown away by the stories here and the talent and the potential for the storytelling. But I constantly encountered this question of what it is to be a South African filmmaker and what a South African film needs to be. And for a long time, the pitches that were coming my way or that I was exposed to, or what some of the older generation was consistently doing, is to be a South African filmmaker, you had to tell an apartheid story. And I think the younger generation is pushing back against that hard because South Africa is so admirable in so many ways and being so much multicultural, but also having such a finger on the pulse of global storytelling as well as local, because of having serviced international productions for so many years and knowing the potential for storytelling across all genres. And I think it's something that we're really good at here. And the younger generation is sort of out to show that and demonstrate that to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely, Kelsey. And I think it's just been that thing over the years, you know what, probably over the past 17 years, I've spoke to a lot of people in South Africa, whether they're filmmakers or not filmmakers. And I've spoken to a lot of people, and I've asked them, you know, what do you think of South African films? And there's been, over the past 17 years, there's been a huge percent of people that say to me, oh, I don't like South African films, and I don't like it. I'd rather go watch an American film. And what is interesting with that over the years, that I think that mindset of what South Africa normally makes, and making those, you know, those apartheid movies, and like you said, Kelsey, with the younger people now, you know, thinking more out the box. And I think there's a lot of gems from South Africa over the past 15 years that have also been lost, where where most people would have watched it, but because of their mindset, they go, oh, it's probably going to be like this film or like that film, and they're not really open-minded. But, you know, for me, honestly, and I'll do a 360 on this, so just hear me out, is that I wasn't a big fan of South African films, but I'm also like a big film geek, where I've watched like a lot of history of, you know, 70s South African movies and 80s South African movies. And the funny thing is that, you know, the funny thing is, like, even like in the 70s, you know, in the 70s, there was a guy called Peter Henkel, and he did like 3 Westerns. And, you know, he did, it was, what is this? Scotty and Co., They Call Me Lucky, and 3 Bullets for a Long Gun. And there was just the South African guy, and he made like, this is the 70s. So during the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of like genre like movies. And I mean, the best one that I can say is there was an Afrikaans TV series called Interstellar. And that was like, I don't know if you guys remember, like Terrorhawks or Thunderbirds or Captain Scarlet. And it was all, you know, the puppets, and it was all the production design, and it was set in Cape Town in the future, with all these, you know, spaceships and everything that they made in the studio. And that's like awesome. That's like probably the best, you know, like really genre. I think it was 81 when that came out, and it was cool.
That sounds like something amazing that badly needs a restoration.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, no, it's so funny. It was so funny because there was this, I mean, I remember there was this robot, and this robot was just a guy like holding his nose, saying, okay, Mr. De La Rey. And I was like, it was so fucking funny. And then, you know, just with these heavy, you know, South African accents, and then obviously in Afrikaans, they were like, donkey, Mr. Gordon, or Captain Gordon. It was like so cheesy and so funny, but for that time, it was fucking amazing. Like for high budget of, you know, really making this like sci-fi stuff. So when you look at that stuff, and that's like 70s and 80s, and you look at this guy there was a director called Ivan Hall, and he made like, you know, in the 70s and 80s, he made all these like weird like martial art films, and all these films. I mean, there was this other film that the same director made. It was called Nuki, and Nuki was like, it was like a poor man's E.T. I don't know if you guys have seen. I don't know if you guys have seen Mac and Me. So it's like, normally I would call Mac and Me the poor man's E.T., but this was like the poor man's Mac and Me. So it was just like this alien looking for his brother in the bush with these guys, and looking for his brother. So when you look at those movies, and you look at some of the movies that came in, like Space Munity, and we have like Graham Clark in there and stuff like that, we had a lot of stuff, and then all of a sudden it stopped. Everything stopped, and there was none of those like sci-fi stories, out of the box, like genre movies. And then I think that was the section where everybody just watched this same stuff, and they were like, oh, they're just over it. And now it's just done a completely different turn. And I think it was that mindset of South Africans judging these certain types of films. Oh, there you go. Judging these types of films. And that was the difference. And there was so many gems over the years that were like really great films. But, you know, even in the past 7 years and 3 years, it's completely changed, and it's completely, everybody's thinking out the box. And I think what Kelsey said, or Michael said, you know, it's everybody really pushing, you know, those boundaries and thinking, you know, there's so many other stories to tell, and we can do that. And, you know, everybody on this panel, you know, I've seen all of your guys' work, and it's amazing, and I love it. And it's so great that we're really pushing these boundaries, and even me as a filmmaker, you know, doing the style that I want to do. And South Africa is very conservative. So the shit that I want to do has been like frowned upon for like such a long time. And then in my mindset, because I grew up with, whether it's French or German cinema or whatever, that I'm just like, hey, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. You know, it's not that bad. And it's just interesting how more doors are opening and more opportunities. And like everybody on this panel are doing, you know, they're doing awesome. So many great stuff coming out.
Yeah, a couple of things coming in on the Q&A thing that I want to kind of throw in here. First is a comment and an observation. I'm apologize if I pronounce your last name wrong. I'm almost certainly going to, but I'm going to try. Siba Makaluza just put in, as the younger generation, we're tired of stories that depict pain. We live in our socioeconomic pain, and the aim of cinema or film is for us to sometimes transport and leave and enter a new world through vast storytelling. We want to be entertained. We're tired of pity. Which I think is a pretty great way of putting it.
Like, I won't. Oh, go for it, Bradley. Go you.
So sorry, I just want to say I couldn't agree more, and I think at Gambit Films, I think I can, on this point, you know, speak for us and say, you know, we are also tired of that. You know, we wanna make the kind of content that we are excited about watching. And you know, that's what we do, and that's what we look for. And yeah, we don't want to tell you know, we don't want to tell historic stories, even though, you know, we do feel a responsibility in some ways as South African to obviously to make our stories authentic. But yeah, we want to entertain. You know, our aim is to entertain, and to entertain globally, not just locally.
And a question, which I'm going to reframe it just slightly, but from Stephen Nagel, kind of you guys, as you're coming in and you have these kind of genre aspirations and things that are a little bit more commercially aspiring, and you're starting at a time when it really is a lot of struggle films being made. You know, how open were the funding bodies to you as you came in, and the existing structures and the existing thing? Like, could you get a meeting? And is that still a thing? Is there a disconnect between what the funders want to fund and what the filmmakers and what the audiences want to see? I'm going to pick on Travis because he looks like he's thinking very deeply.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I'm just trying to go back to, you know, us trying to fund Indemnity, which took, you know, quite a number of years to finally get the film fully financed. I think people are definitely more open to more genre films, and I think definitely, especially in recent years, I think there's been a sort of migration for the kinds of, or an appetite for the kinds of films coming from South Africa, and that's really sort of on the back of filmmakers in the last sort of 10 years, sort of pushing the boundary, like you were saying, where I find, you know, looking or if I just think of, for example, the kind of the shows. Sorry, I just lost my track there. Train of thought there. What I wanted to say was we have been trying to produce genre films for a really, really long time, and I think initially it felt like it was just this massive sort of uphill battle, and it was a case of how is this going to sort of work for South African audiences, or people, finances were, I think, a little bit more hesitant when it came to genre films being produced. And I think it's changed, yeah, quite a bit now. Sorry, I'm just losing my track here a little bit, my train of thought. Someone jump in for me, please.
I'll save you, Travis, but I'm just gonna support everything you just said. Because you're right. I got a lot of, this was quite interesting for me, again, coming in, because I've always been a sci-fi nerd, but I think everyone on this panel, we all share a common passion and enthusiasm for genre. But when I was first approaching local bodies with regards to a sci-fi project I got a lot of South Africans don't like sci-fi. responses, and that like sci-fi doesn't do well theatrically from a South African audiences want to see this and this, but sci-fi isn't among the among the tech boxes of what South African audiences are interested in. But I think that came more from a place of a concern that the budget that you can access as a 100% South African film isn't high enough to do sci-fi the way people imagine sci-fi must be done, which is like giant VFX sequences and action elements and, you know, outer space and all the crazy wardrobe and whatnot. And while that is a valid concern, that's where the clever conceptualization comes in, which I have to say every single filmmaker on this panel excels at, of doing really, really smart, contained, high concept work. And it's almost like when you do a play in a black box theater space, you have to get really, really clever and creative about how you approach things, because you don't have the budget or the resources to do whatever you want. But in some ways that just makes the product even better. And I think working in the confines of the budgets that we has created really interesting work.
Yeah, I think over time now with you know, with the budgets and wanting to as directors and storytellers, like you said, Kelsey, you know, we think out the box and there's so many different ways. And I think maybe, you know, for when it comes to funding and stuff, they think, oh, you know, oh, we need this and we need that, and there's no way we could pull it off. But at the same time, you know, there's been plenty of time. I mean, there's one producer I spoke to, and I think, you see, the difference now is there's so many films that are drifting out of South Africa, and that's what's amazing. So the thing is, a while back, it was just in this circle, and it was just in South Africa, and no films were leaving. And I think that's where you know, I spoke to one producer and I said, you know, why don't we do this and why don't we do that? And they said, you know, but you know, we have to make our bread and butter. And I was like, what does that mean? And it's like, well, we have to make our bread and butter, you know, sell the films in South Africa. And I'm also like, yeah, but there's a whole world out there. And at the end of the day, you know, the movie business is a business. So you got to make a movie that you know that you can sell, that you know that you can take to a certain audience, and then that's the whole thing. And you know, it's also like, you know, it's like the middleman, where the difference is that, you know, there's many South African producers in South Africa that, you know, they don't have a sales agent, and now because they haven't got a sales agent, they don't know where to go, how to sell it, and how to get to the next thing. And I think that, you know, that's a lot of the time is that missing key, where you get a sales agent for your film, and then, you know, there's that bridge to, you know, different countries and getting the work out and festival runs and all that. And it's such a big change. But when I spoke to this producer, I couldn't believe that a lot of people think so small, and there's a whole big world out there. And I think that's what stopped us in the past from bringing all these amazing, you know, new filmmakers thinking of these amazing stories and doing something different. And, you know, people from the States or the UK, you know, have over the years now, as, you know, attracting eyes on South Africa. And I think, you know, once, you know, District 9 and, you know, and even Clint Eastwood coming to shoot here and all these just different things, and Taute winning the Academy Award over the years, it's just, you know, every year there's just something way in the world that's happening more in South Africa that people are looking at, all these like success things. And I think it's just opened more doors for South Africa, for people to find out more information that they don't know about us here in South Africa, and more films. And I'm one of those guys that, you know, I really love watching, you know, films from different countries and going, oh, I've never seen so many films from this. I would like to dig and see what I can find.
I was going to ask you something very specific, Nosipho,
Okay.
kind of on that note, and the idea of kind of the world changing and the marketplace changing and people looking in. I mean, your progression, and I mean, Travis was heavily involved in number 37 as well, right from the beginning, but going from a small little short film to kind of fighting and struggling to make the feature right around the time that Netflix is launching on the continent. And then I'm just going to go ahead and say this. You'll probably find it embarrassing, but you went from there to kind of leveraging Netflix and then that relationship and getting in. And the oldest chestnut in the world in sales and in the film community has been that Black content doesn't travel internationally. And you took the success of number 37 into creating your series Blood and Water, which, this is me just talking because I haven't actually seen this number, but I can pretty much guarantee that you are the most viewed African director ever in history in terms of reach onto the planet.
Oh, no.
And you,
I will not accept that because I do not know for as
no, but I think it's just
Take it.
I
do
don't
not know it as a fact,
anybody,
so I will not accept it, but it's possible.
I don't know anybody who could argue that, because you made a show that's, I mean, so many reasons Blood and Water, according to traditional wisdom and conservative kind of business wisdom, shouldn't have worked internationally. It's not star-led, it's teen cast, it's partially in local dialect. You know, it's not big and splashy in all of this, but you launched it, and not only is it successful across all of Africa, not just South Africa, but it hit #1 in the United States, it hit #1 in the UK, and I always forget which one of France and Germany was #1 and which one was #4.
France was one.
I think France was number one.
yeah.
But like, it just crushed it there too. And these are territories that Black content is not supposed to do well in. And even the experience of Five Fingers, like, you know, they say that all the time, you know, Asia is notoriously racist towards Black content. And the largest international sale that Five Fingers did was in Japan.
Yeah,
like,
I think
it's not true. None of that stuff is true anymore.
it's not true. To be honest, I don't think it ever was true. I think that there's been a general laziness in the industry as a whole to really push and try to, whether it's about marketing and placing films properly. I think already when you label something as urban, which is what for a long time has been happening, when you label something, you're already saying it only belongs to these certain groups of people. Whereas, you know, you don't, if it's a coming of age film, it's a coming of age film. It doesn't matter if it's a Black girl or white girl or an Asian girl, that doesn't matter. The story is the same. And I think for me, when I think about genre, that's what's exciting about it, is that it becomes a vehicle that anyone can recognize. And anyone can get into, and then you start to remove all the stereotypes that people think, you know, will become the blocker to something becoming a success. And I, you know, so even with, you know, with number 37, I think as Gambit Films, that was something we always knew we wanted to do. We were making that film with the purpose of leveraging it to make the next thing. And everything we do. So whether it is an Indemnity, whether it is a Blood and Water, that it's always about how do we use that to set us up for the next thing that we want to do that's maybe a little bit bigger or a little bit more out there, a little bit more different. And so with Blood and Water, thinking about it specifically from that perspective, just to go back to a comment, the earlier comment about pain, as South Africans and looking at our socioeconomic state and all the problems that we have all the time, you know, and in terms of cinema and in terms of whether it's TV or whatever, and how we depict ourselves in our content, in our stories, in our films. Something that was really important to us, and thankfully to Netflix as well, was that we wanted to present Black joy, and we wanted to present Black stories and Black kids in an aspirational way, which in South Africa, even a lot of South Africans even were struggling to get their heads around, oh, but how is this authentic? And it's like, yeah, it's authentic. It may not be authentic to every single South African, but there are South Africans who are living this way. And let's show some different stories that are not so much about the pain that we're having. And having said that, I do think that it's not about moving away from showcasing our pain or the things that we're struggling with. It's more about the how we do it. For me, it's like, you know, any great film will have conflict, will have something that is compelling in someone's pain, in a character's journey that fills them, whether it's loss or whether it's their fears or whatever you want to tell that story. But is it from a place of, we want to just drum in and make you, like, we want to make sure that when you leave, you're exhausted because you were so sad, you were so tired and you're so depressed? Or do we want you to walk out and be like, man, that was really cool. Did you see how that woman was so scared of this and that, but then they came back and they kicked butt and they stood up and they were cool and they fought those monsters? Or do we want to use, do you know what I mean? It's like, how on the nose do we want to be in the stories of pain? And I think that's what's exciting about for me, this space in these filmmakers is that we're not telling stories that don't mean anything. If I think about Five Fingers from the Sky, if I think about any of them, they're not stories that are meaningless, that aren't telling authentic stories, that are experiences that South Africans go through, and that depict pain, whether it's a number 37, like a story of pain, right? But let's make the ride fun. And for me, those are the films I grew up watching. I think that's probably the common thing around the filmmakers coming out that we've been talking about in this panel so far, is that we grew up watching stuff that we were entertained by. And it doesn't matter if it's, the best martial arts films. It's like someone who's like, half the time it's like someone's lost someone. Like it could be a revenge story. It could be like, you know what I mean? It's like a war story, but it's done really epically. And I think for me, that's what's great about what we're doing as a generation. It's not so much being tired of pain, it's about being tired of pity, which whoever made that comment.
I agree. It's like the pity feeling. And it's also like a point of view thing. Like exactly what you're saying. It's like you can't ignore the past and real tangible human stuff that is part of the stories of people, and someone will come across with a unique version of apartheid stories or whatever, but as long as it's coming from a unique type of point of view, even if it's not even with genre, but just something that opens a new door to how to think about something and isn't just a sort of like just a general, a lot of the films before that were like dealing with apartheid and stuff like that, I don't know, they had just an overall wash of like lack of some sort of exciting clarity into something, like individuals of like, how could people think like that? Or how did they deal with a certain situation? I don't know, but someone can go make the lives of others version of an apartheid film that'll be like, wow, that's really interesting, anyway, not to go on. But I don't think it's about moving away from the past. It's just what it is, like what you actually make.
I want to come to that in just a second in terms of some of the way genre can be used to manipulate POV and make things accessible. But very quickly, before I do, because we were talking about Blood and Water, Sibo just chimed in here to say, we need season 2, please. Are you able? Are you able to say anything?
Bradley, say something. I don't know.
We're not able to say anything as yet, but it's what I can say. It's not far away, guys. It's not far away, and watch the socials. Very soon we will
next
be,
week. Can't wait.
Very soon we will be we'll be notified on those platforms. But yeah, it's not far away. Really,
that's a definite yes.
The word yes never came out.
Bradley knows more than I do, apparently. So Bradley knows a lot more than I do.
Coming back around to kind of Michael, what you were saying a little bit, and kind of in terms of POV and things, I've always argued, and I think this statement applies a couple of different ways here, that when you get into kind of genre, one of the things that it does is it creates a sort of, I talk about it as being like a sort of positive tribalism. As soon as you package things that way, you kind of instantly find your people. And it allows people to draw in, and it's a connector in terms of kind of communities. Like you look at kind of filmmaking people like you, and what I've always loved working in the festival world about the genre world more so than the art house world is that in the genre world, you see filmmakers get together who are like super cheering for each other, and they form bonds and they end up working together, and it's all like, oh, you're like me. And that thing happens, and that connection with audiences happen. But it also becomes a really powerful thing in terms of how you tell a story and how you can open something up. Because I was thinking today specifically about Five Fingers, and if you were to break that down thematically, what that film is about is the failure of the Rainbow Nation. And it's about, this grand idea that didn't work or has not worked to this point. And it's saying things about kind of a group of people who have been consumed by corruption. And I mean, we're watching this play out in real time, and with some of the recent things that have been happening around Zuma and the protests turning violent and all of that. And you could have made that movie as an art house drama, and I'm sure there are certain people in the funding world who would have preferred you to have made it that way and would have wanted to fund it that way, but nobody would have ever watched it.
Yeah.
And instead you found a way of telling a story that acknowledges all of that, but the arc of the character is about recognizing those things and understanding those things and defying them anyway. That it's a story of defiance of despair, as opposed to just letting it wash over you and sitting around and being sad. And that angle just changes everything.
Yeah, I think for us, it was quite a bit, was like the cycle of trauma, and which is linked to violence and all that stuff, is hard to break. Like you can't just turn a switch off and now people must get on to, and just like everything must be balanced and all figured out. It's sort of like what you had to go through growing up as well. Like the trauma you went through kind of also dictates, if you've had to fight to have something, it's hard to just let all that go if you've sacrificed a whole lot to get it. And those sort of, you've seen in a lot of other countries, just those cycles of oppression or having a violence on you as a child, then you grow up and you're trying to free yourself from that, but often those same people then cause more problems just because of the traumas you've actually been through and the things you've been fighting for yourself. It's hard to let it all go. Anyway, but yeah, the genre thing, it was always for us, like, how do we make sure people would want to watch it internationally and it doesn't just feel like too much of an African art house film that's not accessible? Like, so to like elevate it up with the Western things and sort of push, elevate and heighten ideas so it's a little bit more mystical, just so that there's more buy-in for, like we're saying, like a genre audience where there's things to hold on to that's like funner to view than trying to deal with something too sort of heavy. And there's, tropes within genre stuff that also make it easier to follow those story journeys, even though within a different country and a different language that people don't know, there's so much that's hard to relate to that can put people off a little bit. So like the genre aspects of it just gives you like a guiding rope to sometimes hold on to, of like what's pulling you through the film and the momentum of it and kind of what you know and what you love about things to hold on to. But the funding part was really tough. It was like 8 or 9 years from when we had the first draft of the script. And you would think like us making it more Western meant it was more accessible, but we found ourselves as an in-between, where on the commercial side, we would go to people or funding more like industry or money-orientated funding as opposed to arts funding organizations. And where the money would come from on a business level would be a bit like, it's a bit too off. It's not kind of, hasn't got enough action. It's not kind of fun enough. It's like trying to be a little bit too simmering and too interesting. So it was tough there. And then on the art side, where there were a lot of different funds, World Cinema funds and things like that, where we thought, well, we could probably get in there. It felt too commercial for them. So it was a tricky line where we were like, I think that's the movie though. That's what's cool about it. But it was, either side thought, well, the other side will take that one, like it's a bit too, it's not quite commercial enough and it's not quite art house enough. So like, it's not quite for us. So we had that quite a bit. That was tricky. Whereas I think now, like this, maybe those things have shifted a bit more, with more audience being open to things, watching more interesting stuff from all sorts of countries. Commercially, people, I think funding and stuff like that, there's a little bit more of the understanding that audiences might just show up for it. And because of streaming and the changing of that in the last few years, there's just much more of a space for things to exist if people like it,
Yeah. And kind of another question, kind of somewhat related onto that POV thing, and Nosipho as well. When you were speaking, you talked a little bit about, people talking about, is it authentic, but authentic to who? Like that whole question. And there's a really specific and really difficult challenge when it comes to representation in South Africa in particular. Like over here, we think in really binary terms. It's kind of black content, white content, and maybe people think of, oh yeah, there's also some Latinos and some Asians, maybe, if their thinking gets that far. But we think about it in really binary terms. And then when you approach South Africa in particular, you're 21 recognized language groups there, I think. It's a big
11
number.
It's 11 official languages. But there's lots more. It's just those are the official ones. Yeah.
And so kind of that, I mean, that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody to say that you're supposed to be representative of South African experience. because there's an insanely broad breadth of experience in that, and there's a ton of kind of really of things to come. And like Michael, you in particular with Five Fingers, like you walked into something that's potentially a massive landmine in terms of being a white director walking in, not only telling a story that's all Black characters, but also in a language that you don't speak. And I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about kind of how, like, that conversation is a continuous conversation. I know enough to
and
know
it's
that,
grown
but
so
how
much.
you navigate all of that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's other people who might want to talk to it a bit more, but it's also through the time from like myself and Sean Drummond, us trying to make Five Fingers to when we got it done, it was like 10, 11 years, even just in that space. Like when we were like, let's do this, it would like, Taute was the only foreign language film that had sort of done well in like ever, or at least in the 10 years of being around. That was a white director doing something in Zulu, I think it was, or also, I can't remember, but it was, I remember thinking like, it was fine. Like it wasn't even that much of a question thing, because I was in that maturity wise, just being honest, that's where I was as like a 21-year-old. Those questions weren't being pushed and asked. And as we were trying to make the movie, it just seemed like a good idea to us and we liked it. And as we were going along, it started being like, should we be doing it? You know, like, I don't know if this is now, times are changing, and almost where I am now, it would be something that I'd be very reticent to just take on. It would be much more like I'd really have to know why I'd be going there or why I'd be the person for it. But it just shows you how much times have changed in like 10 or 15 years, that conversation, that awareness. You know, like when Gavin Hood did Tsotsi, there was like zero, or unless I was ignorant to it, but there was zero conversation about that. You know, it like didn't exist. It was almost just cool that that movie got made, you know. So it's interesting how times change. But the one thing that kept it alive for us going through that process, starting to feel like, is this right for us to be doing, was just being super honest about it and knowing that we're actually growing culturally in theory, as long as there's an honesty there and we're always talking. You shouldn't create a strong divide like that. It's almost worse to segregate everything else and go, that is not a space that you're allowed to be in. That's not a space you're allowed to be in. But it's just how you access it, and that everyone's okay with it, you know, and that there's an honesty there. And each step of the way, as we were casting, it was always the conversation with every actor was just like, call us out on anything, call me out as script stuff. We went through everything with each actor going, is there anything you don't feel right about, or that you would say you would bring something else to change your line? We gave everyone their lines going like, you know, is there other ways that you would feel like this is what, if you were redoing your character, how you would be doing this, you know? And so we were keeping the tropes of the Western and what we were doing on more archetypal levels, but then opening the space up a lot for change and movement in there. And some of the stuff got changed a lot and some didn't at all, just depending on the people involved. But that openness to like not feel like, to allow to be challenged and go, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm saying the right thing now, if it's okay that we're doing the scene like this, or it should be very different. I think then it's positive, you know, like I learned so much from it and grew a lot from it. And from making a movie like that, I also think there's audiences that learn things from it from a different point of view, or going into that culture. You know, it's such tricky stuff, but hopefully overall, you know, those communications and those spaces are open to work, and if it's in the right way, you know, crossing cultures.
Have you seen, trying to think the right way to frame this. I know and how to summarize it quickly for people who don't know how funding works down there. One of the major funders for people outside of this is kind of the cable TV network, is Mnet, who are kind of the dominant player in all of sub-Saharan Africa. And they commission a lot. They fill a really key point in kind of people's finance plans locally. And Mnet has always had a very particular taste, and they've had an overwhelming preference in one language direction for a very, very long time. Like really strongly pressing people towards Afrikaans content if you want to do the deal with them. And I know certainly like Nosipho and Travis, when you guys were developing number 37, if you'd had your preferences, would that have been Afrikaans? And then how have you seen it change? And obviously it has, because Kelsey, they're a major funder of your film, and your film's English.
I'll answer very quickly because I think Travis will probably have a slightly longer answer than I will. I think with number 37, the way it had started as an Afrikaans short film. And so that's the culture in which we were exploring, the people, the part of the world, part of the country. The Afrikaans is such a natural language in that it felt. I think we explored the idea of doing it in English initially because the idea in our minds was that foreign language doesn't travel and that it wouldn't necessarily, we would become not commercial if we did that and it would become difficult to sell. So we explored that, but it was purely from a business decision and not from a creative decision that we're exploring that. And ultimately, you know, we came to get, it was an agreement actually, it wasn't so much a push from him that number 37 just needed to be, you know, it felt that from an authenticity point of view, it felt lacking. In that sense. And I don't speak Afrikaans, so I only ever pushed for that because of the story. It worked. It wasn't really I don't speak Afrikaans at all. And from a cultural perspective, as a Zulu girl, my family is still quite angry with me that I've made so much Afrikaans content. So
yeah, I think from a cultural point of view, it just felt right to do the film in terms of you know, the subculture we were exploring. It just felt right to do the film in Afrikaans. So yeah, it felt like the right decision in the end.
Travis, is that Indemnity or is that number 37?
No, I'm talking about number 37. Number 37. Indemnity, which is, I'd say 60% Afrikaans, 40% English. I mean, we wanted to make we were pushing to try and make an English film for the same reasons, thinking that, you know, it had the ability to travel a little bit more. I think whenever we are producing something with Mnet as partners, just because of their model and in terms of the audiences that they find tunes in most for the content that they produced, it was skewed towards Afrikaans. And that's why there's a lot of sort of push for them to produce Afrikaans content because it's actually one of their biggest audience bases. And so the films and when they're thinking about these huge deposits in terms of, you know, the cash that they're injecting into films, it just makes sense for them financially. But with Indemnity, yeah, they were quite open to it. So we try to find an organic way to have it be both Afrikaans and English by having certain characters speak Afrikaans and certain characters speak English, and do that in a way that still felt true to the characters we were representing on screen, and it never felt forced, and that we had to do this in Afrikaans, and yeah, we managed to make that work, I think.
And then Kelsey, they've become that same group has become a major partner of yours, not only on this film, but you've got a 3-picture slate with them.
Yeah, we're very grateful. It's interesting, the whole English language and the language argument. It's important to speak to, again, going back to the whole idea of film as a business and balancing that with authenticity and being representational of the culture or the story that you're telling. And I think for a very long time, Mnet 100% was primarily only supporting or financing Afrikaans content because, for the exact reason Travis said, their primary audience base with Afrikaans. But in the awareness of how to grow a sustainable industry in South Africa, there's a cap to the amount of budget or production budget that you can access here to make a viable film, and the amount of commercial profit you can expect to make just in South Africa or the African continent. And being more open-minded to English is all part of the South Africa's trajectory and recognition of the fact that the more films that we can do that travel and have global mass appeal, the more beneficial it is for us overall in terms of re-injecting profit and returns back into the local industry. And that openness to English language across the board with not just Mnet, but every finance option in South Africa is the growing awareness of the fact that if we don't push outwards and develop content that has equal appeal to local audiences and global audiences, we won't maximize the potential of what local filmmakers can accomplish. And I think Mnet, I mean, this is cutting edge what Mnet is doing with his slate. They've never supported a genre slate like this before, and we're so excited and so grateful to have the opportunity to really run wild with this, because it is it's much, let's just put it this way, it's much less conservative than anything they've done in the past. And they've been supporting more and more projects in line with the type of things that the younger voices are interested in doing. And that's really exciting.
I just want to quickly add that with this language discussion, I do also feel that it's a balance, right, between the business side, which makes sense because you want your films to travel. But I think there's a level to which we also have to think about setting South African films apart, setting our stories apart in a way that feels right for the story, the ways that, I think there's times when I've seen films where I'm like, why are these guys sounding like this? Why are they speaking English in this moment? They wouldn't normally speak English. And why do they sound American? Why did they suddenly have an American accent? I've heard that on some shows and I'm like, why is that happening? I don't walk around and hear people speak like that. And if I do, we all laugh at them because they're a bit of a joke. Why are they doing that? And so I think there's a bit of balance. And I think one of the things, if I just quickly, which isn't a film, it's a show, but if I think about Blood and Water, it's primarily English. And that made sense for that show, though, because of the age group, the young adult age group, and the kids that we're dealing with, who primarily in that type of school, in that type of world, actually communicate in English. My sister, who's a few years younger than me, she is Zulu, and yet she speaks English to me all the time. And I don't mean to call her out if she's on this panel, if she's listening in at all, but Lerato will typically, you can start a conversation with her in Zulu, she'll respond in English, you go Zulu, she'll respond in English to the point when she's responding in English. And so you're now speaking in English because that's where it's naturally gone. But except when she's speaking with her parents and with our parents and so on. And I think for me, it's about finding that balance of, in South Africa, we know how we communicate. We know that if I'm speaking professionally in a setting like this, I'm likely going to be speaking English. So it makes sense in the story. But as soon as I'm with my people, that I'm going to move and flow between different languages. And I think with the opening of streamers and the world opening up globally in general, there's a lot more tolerance and for language that is not just English. And I think for me, it will be exciting to see some of that coming through and not being lost as we kind of go, oh, we're opening up to English. I think it's great that we are. It's just a bit of a balance finding that.
Yeah. I think even in the last 5 years, it's changed a hell of a lot, just worldwide with subtitles for films and series. Everybody's very, very open up to it, so much more open up to it than what it was. I mean, I've always watched subtitled films, and then it comes to sometimes where I'm like, oh, I can't watch subtitled film tonight. I want something easy to watch, but it's so much more open now. I mean, I know so many people now, or so many big series, and it's all foreign language, like a hell of a lot of it, and it doesn't bother people anymore, and that's awesome.
I think for number 36.
Go, Bradley.
For number 37, when we were in the days of trying to finance it and speaking to, because we always, it was always the plan to sell it internationally, and therefore it had to be genre first. And when we were speaking to certain international sales agents, in the early days, I'm talking like 2014, when we were trying to even get the film financed, even some of the local guys were saying, no, it has to be English. It has to be English. It has to be English. And so, we took a big risk when we decided to keep it authentic, but I think that decision has paid off, and I think just also the timing of it all, when it went to the world, it was at a time when the world was changing and people were open to subtitles. People were starting to open up to exploring genre, which is the familiarity, but with the backdrop of different subcultures, of people they never knew before, worlds they've never seen before. And I think that brought additional excitement to complement the genre. But, the genre was what was familiar. Number 37 is a thriller. And so, the international audience, adopted that as, this is a thriller. So I'm expecting to be, thrilled in certain ways. And, oh, by the way, this is a new world. It's a different kind of people that I'm experiencing. So I think yeah, it has definitely opened up. And I think our timing was right with number 37. Not that we had a crystal ball, but I think the decision to keep it authentic, eventually paid off.
Yeah. Well, I can say with absolute certainty, I won't tell the whole story, but because it takes a while. But in the streaming world, for sure, the streamers had a kind of a come to Jesus moment where they realized that they had retrained their audiences in terms of being acceptant of foreign language and subtitles. And it's not something that they set out to do, but they realized it had happened. In the Netflix context, that was specifically with Dark, the German sci-fi series.
Great show.
And there's a whole thing there, but I won't get into it. I do want to flag super quickly. We were scheduled for 90 minutes, and we are capped there. We're about 70 into that, so I want to take as many kind of questions from the audience as I can. I know there's a few things waiting in the Q&A. Anybody who's got a specific question, please put them in there, because we're going to switch gears to that real soon to try to get through as much as we can. Before we do, I do want to pull in Ryan a little bit, because we've been talking very much about kind of the very traditional way of making things in South Africa, which is not what you did. You made a wildly non-traditional, very, it's a ballsy movie where you kind of threw yourself out there. I got to imagine it was a whole lot of kind of punk rock attitude, DIY. We're just going to do this. How does that happen? Like, is there even a scene or a culture for that in South Africa? Like, when you set out, did you even have the security of knowing, okay, I'm going to be able to release this at home?
Well, I think, from the start, from when I came out with the idea, I knew straight away that there's nothing like this in South Africa, and I knew that there will be some problems maybe with distribution, but I'm also, everything that I do, and I think all filmmakers should think this, where you got to compete internationally. And that's why I was saying before, when you come up with the idea, you got to know who you're making this film for, because it's at the end of the day, it's a business. And the 12-year version of me, if I saw this film when I was a kid, I would have loved it. So when you're making something for the horror market, or for genre films and stuff like that, even when it came to funding, I knew that I'm not even going to ask anybody to try and give me money for this film, because one, I want to make it how I want to make it, and it's not the type of film that gets made here in South Africa. And knowing the audience and knowing where the film could go, where it actually did, I knew it would be successful in that way. But because South Africa is quite conservative, and but things are changing and it's more open up. I know, there's a lot of people that has seen it already. We actually haven't the release in October, but there's quite a few people that sneakily already watched it or ripped it or downloaded it and fucking watched it. But yeah, it's this. For this type of film, it was, I just got to that point in my career, was like, I think every director will sit there and go, right, what am I going to make first? It matters so much as a first-time director. What am I going to make first? And I think with Fried Barry, I had all these other scripts, and I'm like, okay, that's cool for this. That's cool for this reason. That's going to cost too much money. And with Fried Barry, it was just the most unique, different story or different film that I haven't seen before. And I think that's what interested me. But what also made me make the film is all the shit that I went through before I made the film. And, over the years, I've met producers that said, we'll do this, and then it fades away. And then you get excited and then it fades away. And then when this came, and I actually went, I'm going to cut it short, but I went through depression, and I had an operation on my kidney. I got sepsis. I nearly died. My cat got sick, and I just went through this horrible, horrible time. And at the bottom of the pit, I was just like, you know, what is the number one thing that I've always wanted to do? And it was to make a film. And, you know, and I rang my producer that I only knew for about a month and a half. And I said, I want to make a film. I want to start next month. I've got this and this and this and this. I've done this and I want to start next month. And I didn't even know him that well. So he didn't know where I was in my head at the time. And he was like, well, you know, have you got a script? And I was like, yes, I've got this and this, but I want to do it in a certain way because the storyline's simple and it's about it's an experience. This film is definitely, you know, a wild trip experience. And, you know, and he's like, well, I said to him, you know, if you've got some money, I've got some money, we'll make this thing. And he was like, well, why do you want to shoot it next month? And I was like, because if we don't shoot it next month, it's never going to happen. So I have to start next month because it will just be another story. And then from there, and when you do day one on a film, you know, that's it. You know, we've started, and I was so happy that I picked that film. And then since, you know, getting on AMC's Shudder and, you know, those guys buying the movie and everything, and, you know, even being on, you see, we don't get Joe Bob's Drive-In here, but obviously, of course, you know what it is. But at the same time, that was such another big thing for the success of, you know, of Friar Barry. It was huge. I mean, on Twitter, it was like the third most talked about movie on the release in America, and I was just like, what? So it's awesome. It's just been so crazy. And to even think, like, going back to what you said of what this type of film this is, and, you know, for being in South Africa, but just branching out to, you know, where I wanted it to go. So yeah, it's just been a great journey, and like hundreds of people just messaging me and just crazy fans. So yeah, it's just been a beautiful, amazing, weird, crazy, you know, trip.
That's an amazing story.
There's a lot more. This is the PG version.
Yeah, just to hop in really, really quick. I think, Ryan, I mean, I know your story and it's a remarkable story. And I think just for everyone who's like tuning in and doesn't know everyone on this panel, just a quick comment. Every single filmmaker on this panel, I have had the pleasure of like crying with in deep depression for years while we all fought to make what we wanted to make. And I think like part of celebrating each other and being so excited for each other and that what you observed, Todd, in the genre community is that we know and have witnessed how hard it's been and what everyone's gone through. And it's a journey that you only really understand when you're in it and when you're fighting for that thing. But it's all well and good to celebrate the massive success stories now, but that is not to detract from the journey of how fucking hard it was. And every single person here is like a fighter and literally went through the lowest of low to get here. And there's a lot of local filmmakers still fighting that fight. And if we can help make that fight even the tiniest bit easier by getting international traction or attracting more finance from international players into South Africa, that would make everything worthwhile, right?
Absolutely.
To help in that journey.
I think that is the point of you know doing more of continuing the fight, you know, each time doing something that's slightly bigger than the last time that you've done it, and yeah, I agree fully. I think every filmmaker is a warrior, you know, because just to get a film made, you know, I know when it hits the theaters, it's all the pomp and ceremony, but you know, what it takes to get it there, you know, is a colossal effort. And so, you know, hats off to everyone that's, you know, that's made a film, and to all the films at Fantasia. Congratulations to every filmmaker there.
A question for everyone from Stephen, who is asking kind of what are your favorite films or the directors and writers that have really inspired your work as you've been going forward? Give me one, Michael. You've got more than one, but unmute yourself first.
Oh, hi there again. That's a tricky one. I like a lot of the very visual but bigger audience directors, Guillermo del Toro or like Alien. Ridley Scott's early stuff was big for me. Spielberg's early stuff, you know, like I really like the bigger audience things with the filmmakers that just had quite strong visions. The other person I actually have always loved is Peter Jackson a lot, like just because of what he managed to achieve. That was like my biggest film school, was just all those DVDs, all those behind the scenes making ofs and commentaries on like all the extended versions of the Lord of the Rings, just hours and hours. But just being able to see bigger stuff being made and people talking about it and the tone in which he did it, I just thought I loved all those people. Like I got to know all of them. And I always loved him for that, like for what he built in New Zealand without ever shooting outside of there, and just sort of built this whole big world. And that was always, for me, getting into it, I was like, that's the bigger ambition. It's like, how do you do that, you know? So I've always been a fan of him for that reason.
Travis?
Yeah, actually, it's funny that you say Peter Jackson, because I feel like The Lord of the Rings basically defined my high school cinematic experience. And he was definitely a big inspiration for becoming a filmmaker, actually, in terms of what he was able to accomplish in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Yeah. And then also a lot of directors in terms of, you know, what they're able to do in terms of world building. I like James Cameron. You know, he's a brilliant filmmaker. Guillermo del Toro, Wes Anderson, anyone that has a very, I think my taste varies quite dramatically in terms of what I can appreciate. Obviously, I like certain, I enjoy fantasy, sci-fi, thriller, action, but I think there are quite a lot of directors that you know, are able to take something unique on the page and turn it into something visually stunning. And I think that's kind of where we draw inspiration from, all of us, really.
That might be the first time I've ever heard James Cameron and Wes Anderson given as examples back to back as an answer to that question. And now I'm just going to be wondering what would have happened if the Terminator was played by Bill Murray. Kelsey?
Yeah, I mean, I can't knock any of the people already listed, but to try to shake things up a bit, how about like Luc Besson's early work? I mean, I was obsessed with all his early films. I love Catherine Boulet. Her French film Fat Girl like left quite a mark in how dark and subversive it was. I've always been really drawn to provocative relationships and sort of the darker undertones of relationships. I mean, I think Sam Mendes is brilliant at that, but Darren Aronofsky as well. Rian Johnson as a contemporary storyteller is incredible with his fusion of sci-fi storytelling, but also really just fundamentally relatable human interaction. And when you get both of those things right, I think you're winning. So yeah, that's kind of my list.
Nosipho?
Yeah, I think the list has kind of grown beautifully here. But yeah, I think for me personally, I love all genre. I think I move between all of them, but I'm really like I'm a very grounded genre filmmaker. So I'm always going to gravitate to like, although maybe he's not as grounded anymore. I love Christopher Nolan. I think his early work, especially for me, was just, and his ability to move into like between like smaller, really intense, like provoking films that like are really like thoughtful and into like big blockbusters. I think I've always just been a huge fan of that. David Fincher is just like, I think I if I could like model my the way that he's just so specific in how he's in every detail that he does for me is incredible. And I've become a huge fan girl of Denis Villeneuve. I think, yeah. Yeah.
He's the next one to name there.
Hey, what?
I was gonna say he's like the next person in line from the people you're saying. It's like he's
I've become a
like
huge
so
fangirl. And again, it's because he just moves between genres so beautifully. But his films, like there's always the same core of like a really like you get the sense that there's a character study. And for me, character is really important. I enter everything through character. So there's this real sense of understanding that world building, yes, but like freaking tension for days, that's kind of what I enjoy. If I can do anything that's going to be like, what, why? That's kind of where I want to live all the time.
Yeah. Ryan?
Yeah, I absolutely love Nolan. I think that's somebody that just, I think, always delivers, especially his earlier stuff, and not so much his last film, but everything that he does I really love. But I'm also a big 80s cinema fan, so I love 80s Spielberg or 80s James Cameron, and looking at John Carpenter or David Cronenberg or very early Peter Jackson stuff. And then actually one of my favorites that is very different than my work, but is Jerry Lewis. He's just always been such a big inspiration of, writing and producing and directing. But yeah, he's, I think there's, with the stories that, I tell, and loving, very much loving characters and very visual stuff, but also, finding that humor, no matter how crazy the situation is, or whatever world you're creating, it's always good to have that funny humor, dark humor. And it's, I think it's all down to like personality and and sense of humor. But at the same time, I really do love all genres of films. It's like music, there's a time and place for everything, whether it's a Sunday and you want to chill and just watch a popcorn movie.
Super complicated one for Kelsey. Let's get ready. Where'd you get your mug?
My friend performed in Cirque du Soleil, and I went to see him perform in New York, and I bought it. I bought the mug in my support of Cirque.
Canadian Cultural
That was stressful.
Institution.
Yeah, exactly. Canada bears all the good things.
Is that Volta? I didn't quite catch
we're
the
also
mug.
responsible.
Yes, no, it is
Nickelback,
Volta.
Is that
the
like
phenomenal
extreme
show?
sports one?
Point.
Yeah, no, it wasn't the parkour one. It was the one just before, but it was extreme.
The bikes. It was with the bicycles and things like that, and the trampolines. Hey, man, I saw that one. It was awesome.
But it was very narrative driven as well, which was a highlight.
Amazing. I think we've lost Todd. Frozen in time. Todd.
We've lost him.
I think is it just the South Africans now that are not?
Yeah,
maybe the whole interview's ended and we don't know. We'll just keep going.
Oh no!
Keep going. Nobody leave. Nobody leave.
It was nice being moderated though.
It definitely helps.
Pleasant change.
Maybe Todd hasn't frozen. He's just really just judging us, and he's just watching us.
Nah, he's
He's back in.
There we go.
You're on mute, Todd.
My internet chose a wonderful time to crash out there. We're just about the end of our time here, so we're going to end with this one, and it's for everybody. But I'm going to start with Bradley because it is most specifically about kind of producer relationships. Do you have any suggestions or tips for screenwriters who are trying to make inroads with producers in South Africa, and kind of how to make those connections, and when you've got a script that you really love and you're really proud of, how do you drive it forward?
I suppose, to find the right producer for, when we look at stuff, we always look at the kind of stuff that we want to make, so I know it's always difficult if you don't know people and that, but, it's try to pair up with producers. If you're a writer, if you're a director, that's kind of like-minded, that wants to make, a certain kind of thing. And I know there's no real way of sort of, there's no list where you can go, oh, these producers in South Africa would like to make these kind of films. So it's really just about networking. It's about, events like these. It's about, just getting in contact with people and trying to put your work before, other than that, there's no real special, there's no real special tips, except to say that when a producer and when the right producer and the right project meet each other, things happen. But it's been our experience as well that unfortunately, you hear the word no more often than yes. So you got to play that numbers game. You got to put yourself out there. You've got to contact people. You've got to pitch to people. And the right project finds the right producer eventually. And it's probably not going to be the first few times, which I think is what a lot of people, everyone believes their project is great. And yes, it is great, but sometimes, you got to match it with the right person that wants to do the same kind of project. And that takes just networking and putting yourself out there and making contact with people.
Yeah, I just quickly want to add to that, something to what Brad said. Part of it, I think, is also that just watching a lot more from a South African context, and then also, I guess, worldly content, just watching a lot of stuff and getting to know who are the people who were part of making that. And the stuff that you like, the stuff that's like, yeah, that's aligned to the kind of thing that I want to make, the kind of stories I want to tell, or the kind of script that I'm trying to do. And then getting to form relationships. I think for most of us, we've met, whether it's at festivals through like, going out as delegations to wherever, and networking and getting to and then also through shared pain and having to comfort each other, like random birthdays spent in like other countries that like no one, like you're all alone and you're like, okay, cool. So you get to know people and you get to talk about the things that you like and what they're trying to do, and you share. I think for me, what I find is a lot of people come to you, oh, hey, I'm so-and-so, I've got this idea. It's like transactional from the get-go. And it's very difficult because, let's be honest, making a film that we've spoken about this whole panel takes a lot of time. It's a lot of energy, a lot of emotional capital that you have to invest into making a film as a producer. And unfortunately, you kind of want to make sure you're doing it with people you like and people that you're kind of invested in. And so coming into it with like, oh, I've got this great idea, which is a lot. I get a lot of emails like that. A lot of people like sliding in DMs with like, and wanting to pitch ideas. And it's like, that's great, but I have no idea who you are. There are people that I know who I've walked this journey with for a long time and they're still trying to get their projects made. I'm far more likely to want to work with someone I've been in the trenches with. And so it's about forming your own tribe, finding your tribe as well. And that goes through networking, but also just taking the time to build a relationship before you say, I have this to do, I want to share this with you, is to be like, hi, I'm so-and-so. Can we talk? I just want to get to know you.
We do get a lot of, and that's why I say, it's finding the right person for the right project. And that's part of it is because you're going into a marriage, really, so you got to first find the person that wants to make the same kind of project that you want to make, but then also you got to figure out, do you like each other, because you're going to be spending a lot of time together. So there's a lot more to it than just hey, I've got this idea, or I've got the best TV show ever, and you have to make it. So it takes time, it takes networking, it takes many conversations to figure each other out.
Yeah, I agree. Like the time is pretty, like, there's no one I've met who didn't take time to figure it out to get there for a first film, and whether it's getting to the point where you go, I'm making this with no money just to make something, because no one will ever make my movie, or you've taken the time to figure the relationships out to get the money you need to finally do whatever it is. There's no magic script you've just written early on, like, well, it's your first thing you've written. It's very possible, but it's just, I've never met anyone like that, and it's also like the criticism that needs to come with those relationships of starting to grow, of going, oh, this is feedback that I shouldn't be defensive about because that's someone else's opinion and I've got to learn all about these different things. It's less time, and it's actually more like learning and finding your place to like know how to do it. You know, that's what I'd reckon.
Yeah, and also just you know, what I always recommend to writers is like don't have that one project that is your baby. You know, yeah, you can have it, but have others as well, because you never know. You know, you got to be, because I think when people have that one project that it's their baby, they, you know, want you to sign NDAs before they share something with you. And so have many ideas, have different projects. And I agree with Matthew, be open to criticism, be open to suggestions on maybe if you try this or maybe if you try that, you know. So just, you know, if you are creative, create a lot. You know, don't just have one baby that you are not willing to even cut their toenails.
And end right there.
Sorry, what? Cut their toenails? That turned weird so quickly, man.
It's me and my dad jokes.
Oh man, that NDA thing, Bradley. Oh, that NDA thing is such a hot button for me.
Yeah,
it's the weirdest thing. If you're gonna like, because I'm in this job, right? It's part of my role at XYZ. I am one of the primary points of contact. I am one of the filters doing first reads and all of those things. It's literally how I spend all day. Every day, I typically have between 20 and 30 scripts on my iPad being waiting to be read at any given time. And when somebody reaches out to me cold and says, "Hey, can I send you a script? I've got this thing. I really think you're the perfect company. You're the perfect people. I want to send this thing to you. Read it." And I say yes. And they're like, "Okay, well, I need you to sign an NDA for it." And I'm like, you don't trust me. Like, what? It's just because the weirdest thing.
Yeah, because I've got a film crew standing ready with a budget, you know, just in case a good script is here and I want to just make it quickly.
Yeah.
You know,
these other 6 projects I've been trying to make for 6 years. This one suddenly jumps in and I'm just going to steal it and make it right now.
Anyway, thank you all so much. This has been a great.
Uh-oh.
Is Todd gone again?
Yeah.
No.
Am I back?
There he is.
Okay,
I'm back.
Am I for real? Ah, stupid internet. Thank you all so much for the time.
Oh no.
No, thank you.
It's like, it's the suspense for me. It's that like, what will he say? How will he?
He's just being a good genre producer is building tension.
Yeah. Or boredom. It's hard to know.
Is he?
Oh, no.
Maybe someone should take charge of this.
It's a cliffhanger, guys. It's a cliffhanger.
Well, I don't know about you. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I'm actually not at my house because my internet's down. So I've got 20 minutes to get back before I turn into a pumpkin because of curfew. So I've got to head out just now.
Living on the edge, Ryan.
Yeah.
He's back.
He's back.
My internet is going funky at the worst possible time.
It's fine. It's a cliffhanger, Todd.
Thank you all so much for taking part. We have come to the end of our time. We're going to let Ryan run and everybody else who's got other obligations.
Awesome.
This was excellent.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. That was absolutely beautiful.
I'm going to get back down to South Africa sometime soon. Gonna happen.
Yeah.
Cool.
Please do.
We're waiting.
This was great. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
so
so
much,
much,
guys.
guys.
Congratulations on
Good
your
to
see all you.
Kelsey. Yay!
Thanks so much.
Yeah, right on. We got to do volleyball again soon, Nosipho.
Oh my gosh.
The last time we were together, we were